Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Fireside CharLA. Before we begin tonight's program, we're excited to share that all of our events are available in Spanish via Zoom's real-time translation feature. To share more about how this works, I'd like to introduce you to our Spanish language interpreter, Alejandra Marroquín. Alejandra.
Gracias, Richard. Me da mucho gusto estar acá con ustedes esta noche. Como dijo Richard, yo me llamo Alejandra Marroquín y conmigo esta noche está Lea. Hoy vamos a ser sus intérpretes esta noche. Y bueno, queremos compartir la idea básica de qué es la justicia de idioma o de lenguaje. Y es el derecho de todos que tenemos para hablar, escuchar y ser entendidos en el idioma en el cual nos sentimos más cómodos. También ahorita estamos haciendo interpretación consecutiva, pero en un momento vamos a empezar con la interpretación simultánea. También queremos recordarle que la creación del espacio bilingüe es la responsabilidad de todos, ¿verdad? Y Richard va a hablar un poco más de eso en un momento. También, por favor, no sufra en silencio si tiene problemas tecnológicos. Por favor, diríjase a Victor, quien va a ser su persona de tecnología. También, cuando ya vaya a prenderse la interpretación, va a haber un globo hacia abajo a la mano derecha. Ahí puede escoger a través de inglés o español el idioma en el cual prefiere. Y como están escuchando, están viendo que estoy usando la E versus la A o la O en español. Esto es intencional. Es nuestro esfuerzo para quebrar los binarios de género. Muchas gracias y ahora se lo paso a Richard.
Thank you, Alejandra and Leah, for your service. Rashad, please go ahead and activate the translation function now for both Alejandra and Leah. A note to our speakers, if you see me making this gesture, please decrease the pace of your comments so that the interpreters can keep up. Also, our interpreters are using non-gendered Spanish. So instead of the O or the A, you may hear the E, which signifies non-gendered language, as well as our commitment to break binaries as exemplified by our adoption of and the usage of the term Latinx. Damas y caballeros, tenemos interpretación, disculpe, en español disponible para este programa. Por favor, seleccione español en el menú debajo. Gracias. Tonight's Fireside CharLA is brought to you in partnership with United Latinx Fund and Latino Coalition of Los Angeles. This online event series aims to engage and educate and advocate on important and timely topics that impact LA's Latinx community during the COVID-19 pandemic, and as well as the recent civil unrest due to and response to police violence. My name is Richard Corral. I am the Interim Executive Director of the United Latinx Fund. I'd like to quickly thank our sponsors for tonight's event, Southern California Gas Company and JP Morgan Chase, for their commitment to and investment in nonprofits like United Latinx Fund that work to transform, uplift, and improve our community's quality of life. Our program is designed to engage you, our audience. Due to our unique summit format tonight, please do enter your questions in the chat box, and we will be addressing your questions throughout tonight's program. Also, tonight's program hopefully will be streaming on Facebook Live. I know our technicians are trying to make it happen, and when it does, I'll let you know. And it will be featured on the Latino Coalition's Facebook page. Cindy, if you could please put the Latino Coalition's Facebook page in the chat box so that folks are able to host a watch party and invite their friends. Also, tonight we follow up on our previously featured guests on their proposed programs, investments, and policies that work to address the most pressing issues facing Latinx and other vulnerable communities throughout Greater Los Angeles. We'll touch upon the economy, policy, the census, and social justice. And in preparation for the upcoming November election, in lieu of our usual post-program mixer, we have a Council District 10 candidate forum lined up immediately after today's CharLA, which will begin at 6 p.m. And it's hosted by the Latino Coalition of Los Angeles, our partners on tonight's CharLA. The candidates forum will feature Supervisor Mark Ridley Thomas and Grace Yu. Please join us as these two candidates share their vision and plans for LA Council District 10, which includes Koreatown and Leimert Park. To facilitate tonight's conversation, I'd like to introduce you to Cristina Sanchez, United Latinx Board Fund Treasurer and Senior Partner at Milagro Strategy Group. Cristina.
Thank you, Richard. Welcome, everyone. Bienvenidos. Alejandra, Lea, gracias por el trabajo que hacen para asegurar que todos estén entendiendo estos programas tan importantes. I was looking back as to when we started the Fireside CharLAs, Richard, and it feels like time stood still back in March. And I want to thank everybody who's joined us for the weekly CharLAs that have been very successful. And of course, just to kind of put this all together. Tonight's first topic is going to be on the economy. And before I toss to you, we have three amazing guests. It's Alejandra Velázquez, Andy Carrasco, and Lily Rocha. And the question tonight for the economy is, please share with us the impacts of COVID, especially in the Latinx community. How have you seen it since March, since the pandemic hit? What are you doing? And just give us a brief overview. And I'll start with Alejandra Velázquez, Senior Director of Public Affairs for Opportune. Alejandra.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And yes, Cristina, I agree. I feel like when we started these in May, so much has happened, but also it also feels like time has stood still. So very quickly, I am the Senior Director of Public Affairs at Opportune, a community development financial institution, CDFI, that provides loans to credit invisibles. So people who are in low to moderate income communities who don't have a credit score or have been miscategorized with their credit score and therefore aren't part of the mainstream financial market. And our loans are designed to help these individuals thrive and build a credit score so that they can then access other products. As we all know in this country, you can't do anything without a credit score. So in terms of the pandemic, the economic impact of the pandemic, I feel like there's been two waves. So you had the first wave early on, which were people who were laid off or who were out of work due to all the closures, right, in response. But then you had your essential workers, which predominantly were people of color. In a city like Los Angeles, a county like Los Angeles, predominantly the Latinx community were the ones that were serving or have been serving as essential workers. So what ended up happening was the second wave was your essential workers who started getting sick or started having family members get sick. And so then they started being out of work. At Opportune, we have been tracking how our consumers or how our clients have been doing and immediately put in emergency hardship programs in place to make sure that people who were affected by the pandemic could find some relief from their obligations. And so we've been able to do is we have now made it even easier for individuals who may be struggling, who may be affected, to get some type of relief. So with Opportune, if any of our clients, all they have to do is call us, go to one of our locations, tell us, I've been affected by COVID, and we immediately put them on an emergency hardship plan, no questions asked, no proof needed. For those who have been on an emergency hardship plan, we've brought tech in. So what we do is they get a text. Are you still affected by COVID? All they have to do is text back the letter Y and they're re-enrolled automatically. Really, our goal is to make it as easy as possible for individuals to really bounce back from this. The last thing we want to see is folks saddled with debt once they come out of this, which is actually going to put them in a worse place. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation released a report recently that 71% of Latinx households with incomes under 100,000 in LA County have been affected by COVID. These are families that were already living paycheck to paycheck. And these are families that are going to need funds to recover from months of expenses. And so we want to be there, continue to be there as a responsible partner that is there both to help our current clients and also help anyone who may need to bridge expenses until they get back on their feet and again in a responsible way.
Thank you, Alejandra. I must note as well, I believe you were the madrina. You were our first speaker for the first Fireside CharLA, if I'm not mistaken. And again, everything that Opportune is doing, we know that our community has been very hard hit, especially economically. Now, I'd like to hand it over to Lily Rocha, CEO and Executive Director of the Los Angeles Latino Chamber of Commerce. Obviously, we know, Lily, you've been at the forefront working with all of our small businesses, helping them get their loans, their PPE. Is it going to be forgiven? Is it not? Tell us how you see it fast forward from when we first had you.
Wow, thank you so much. I want to thank you again for the invitation. Obviously, and I also wanted to say I'm the board president of the Latino Restaurant Association. And the reason I say that is because restaurants have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. And we've seen a lot of devastation there. And so as far as some of the things we've done, no one could have imagined how devastating this was going to be. Obviously, we've had a coronavirus toolkit since day one, and so that I believe was the first thing that we put together. We've had some videos, we've had some webinars where we have given people some business advice, different things. My favorite webinar was the hygiene on reopening. So people didn't have a lot of information on what that meant. Obviously we've had a timeline that moves around with regard to reopening. So we wanted to prepare people for when they did reopen, what that may look like in terms of hygiene and some of the things that can be done. And let me go ahead and talk about the restaurant situation. Obviously, that has devastated the entire industry, but Latinos in particular have been disproportionately affected by the crisis. Latinos overall in all restaurants are about 40% of the workforce in restaurants. And of course, the Latino-owned restaurants have been just devastated from everything from not being able to pivot quickly to delivery. So that's a program that we have right now where we're helping restaurants learn how to get their delivery game on. And so that's something that we offer. Going back to businesses and the chamber, we've had a couple of courses. They're going ongoing on everything that you need to be successful in your business, but we've also added the pandemic and COVID aspect to it. So just, really trying to keep businesses afloat and really trying to analyze the data and seeing what that means. And obviously the Latino community has been really, shattered by a lot of this, the pandemic and a lot of the repercussions from the pandemic. So trying to get ourselves, out of that, trying to dig out of that hole has been very, very devastating. But the good thing is that we do have organizations like Latinx Fund and, the Latino Chamber, LRA, all sorts of great organizations that are really out there trying to help people, whether it's with their loan papers. We've got some great partners, in particular, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, some of the big, having that relationship with your banker is so important, because that's one of the reasons that these loans were not extended out to people, small businesses, a lot of small businesses in communities of color, because we just don't have those relationships with our bankers. We need to have those relationships with our bankers because it will help so much. And I feel like that's another situation where we've been very helpful, making sure that small businesses do have that relationship with their bankers. So it's a little bit about what we've done. We're going to continue to do all of these things and move forward. Hopefully, in a more positive way in the new year. So
Lily, thank you for all the amazing work that you're doing on so many fronts and guiding folks on how to survive this ever organic situation. We know we're in for the long haul. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And we just all need to adjust to the way life is going to be moving forward for the most part. So thank you. I want to make sure everybody that's joining us this evening, if you want to ask some questions, please do so in the chat and we'll be able to answer those later on as we hear from all of our guests. Now, we want to hear from another very renowned person, Andy Carrasco, who's our Vice President of Strategy and Engagement and the Chief Environmental Officer for the Southern California Gas Company. Andy, tell us how you've seen since May, since we've started this. Obviously, the gas company is such a big presence in what you've been doing for our communities.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, Christina. Good evening, all of ULF, and very glad to partner and really be a part of this great CharLA series that you've had. I've been to most of them and just want to thank you for the breadth of information that you're bringing to our community. And thank you for having me back. Just a quick update from the last time I was on. You know, the utility space, as you can imagine, we're deemed essential service provider. Now that our communities were staying home, for the most part, we were making sure SoCalGas continued to provide you reliable and safe service to all of you who were staying at home. And while most of you were at home, cooking more, and I see Victor cooking up quite a storm once in a while there on social media. But as we were home, you know, half of our workforce worked from home, the other half was still reporting to work day in and day out, being able to continue to be part of the workforce that provides you that safe and reliable service. But we also understood that, you know, that wasn't the case for many of our neighbors, as a couple of the panelists have alluded to. You know, we saw a big loss of jobs and the shutdown of businesses, and that was tragic. It's plain and simple. It still is, and we're still dealing with that fallout. But we responded pretty quickly, almost across the board. We looked to quickly suspend any account closures whatsoever across residential and small business. We made sure to restore anybody who had lost service earlier in the year, making sure that their disconnections were back up and running because we knew they needed to be home or continue to run that business. We turned those services back on because it was the right thing to do. But we didn't stop there. We know that experience with the loss of job was very high. And as a matter of fact, if you think about it, there was a whole new slew of population that perhaps were unemployed for the first time, or perhaps never even knew that there were some services out there for the recently unemployed or loss of income. So we made sure that we went wide on our messaging on our CARE program. That's our low income program that provides a 20% discount to our customers. We made sure that people knew, those who were aware and those who were not aware, in multi-languages, and making sure that we were partnering with our community-based organizations to get the word out about those programs. And I'll put a little link in the chat in just a bit.
And
I also
go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I wanted to ask you, since you've had to pivot your dollars for charitable contributions or those in-person events, you sponsor events such as this that are still making a difference. And I want to hear a little bit about what you're doing to pivot those dollars for all the need that's out there.
Absolutely, that was next, and thank you for prompting me. So one of the things that we did and asked, and since March, we really reached out to our community-based organizations, our NGOs, and said, hey, what do you need? We know that we usually come in and partner for your gala or whatever it might be in the future. We want to see if it would be helpful in the time of need that for those that you are servicing, if we can just bring forward our commitment in March, in April. So we made that possible. And so to this very day, I looked at the numbers recently, we brought up to about $3 million worth of giving to our nonprofits so that they're able to provide those very essential basic services that were being rendered. And not only did we see the outpouring of support, but we also saw the pivot of some of these nonprofits who were not even in the food service providing business, now turning all their abilities and focus on feeding the most needy. And I think that was very important. We actually exponentially made sure that was a very focus, that we were partnering with organizations that were making food availability. And then we also focused on workforce. What can we do to continue at least to have some sort of impact, to have folks to continue the work? So we've partnered up and down our service area. Just a reminder, we service from South Fresno County to the Mexican border. And we partnered with folks like Lily Rocha from the Latino Restaurant Association. So a big shout out to her and the organization. We said, Lily, what can you do in this space where we can partner with local restaurants, feed essential workers, keep the jobs going, have the opportunity to provide that very basic support. So we did that in big ways, from the Inland Empire to the San Joaquin Valley, the LA Basin, and throughout. So that was super, super important. And I just, again, Lily, thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for that partnership. It was huge.
No, thank you. No, Andy, thank you so much. We've been able to feed thousands and thousands of people thanks to the generosity of you and your company, and it's been amazing. Thousands of people have been fed that otherwise would not have the opportunity.
And I think with these kind of partnerships, it really attracted others. I know others came into that space. Walmart came into this space, and other major corporations to kind of start the wave of this really much needed support and focus that we need in the community. So we're actually continuing to do that. I'm very proud. But I have just a minute left, but I want to quickly pivot on something that's very important, and that's climate change. And I do want to address that front and center, given that the governor just issued an executive order on passenger vehicles and mid to heavy duty vehicles. That's a big focus. I want you to know, as we've committed to our community through the COVID and the bad times, we're taking full responsibility and focusing on air quality more now than ever before. We're looking at ways how we utilize our existing infrastructure to really provide that focus in a 21st century energy system that works for all of us, but for the most vulnerable. And we've got to look at this in the ways that we can capture, and we're really focused on capturing green gases. That includes renewable natural gas from already emitting methane sources like dairy farms and landfills. And imagine, if you walk with me, if we capture that's already going up, taking this renewable source and using it in the infrastructure that already exists. I think that's very key, very innovative, and ways to really get to the climate change that really affects each and every one of us, especially the vulnerable, in air quality and the opportunity for green jobs, and really just for a very important public health. So with that, mil gracias. Thank you for having me.
A ti, Andy, Alejandra, Lily, thank you so much for talking to us and giving us updates. And Andy, you pivot to what it is what the governor is saying, and we talk about our vulnerable communities. And yes, we want environmental justice and whatnot. However, it needs to be equal across the board, and think about all those renewables, and everything needs to be accessible to all of our communities, not just those who can afford it. So on that, we go to policy, and we have some amazing guests joining us today. And the question is, please provide us an update on your current policy efforts that are geared towards our Latinx communities and our vulnerable communities for the most part. And I want to start with Assembly Member Mike Gibson. Assembly Member, if we can hear from you as far as your update on some policy efforts.
Yes, thank you very much. I want to say to yourself and also my good friend Richard and everyone, thank you so very much for giving me this brief moment just to say a few words. I want to, again, Fireside, CharLA, you guys rock, awesome, all the work that you do and all the presenters. Thank you very much. I've been on since 5 o'clock, and I really appreciate all the work that you guys are doing. Before I give you an update, I want to celebrate. I was on a call today with Dr. Joseph Castro, who is the new chancellor of the California State University, Fresno. He is the first Mexican-American. I am absolutely excited about his leadership. I told him that we have passed on to him ethnic studies, making it mandatory for those who are going to graduate from the CSU. And so he is very exciting. He is very motivated to partner with our communities and do a lot of incredible things. So thank you very much. And it's been an exciting day in the midst of reaching 200,000 people who've lost their lives due to COVID-19, during the wildfires, the racial tension and unrest, all the things that plague our community, homelessness due to COVID-19, job loss, delay, that we're trying to do everything we can to making sure that people through EDD who are eligible for these benefits get these benefits. And we're fighting on a daily basis to make sure that my office received over 1,000 calls literally a day, just with people who having a hard time getting their unemployment benefits. But since February 6th, an average of 858 deaths occurred due to the virus. That just represents California, and more people have died from this virus than the 5 wars that we've been in, whether it's the Korean War, whether it's the Vietnam War, Iraq, and so forth and so on. And that worries me in terms of this particular pandemic. But I know that if we continue to follow all of our healthcare professionals and do what they instruct us to do, we can get past this. The governor has on his desk my Assembly Bill 1196. 1196 was a response to the murder and execution of George Floyd. We know that members, African Americans, did I lose you? Okay, we know that African Americans and Latinos, there was 27% of African Americans who have died from these techniques being used, and also 26% of Latinos who've lost their lives at the hands of police officers who were utilizing these techniques as well. And as a result of that, thank you very much for putting it up. The speaker on Monday appointed me the chair of the select committee on police reform in California. And so I look to this great organization, CharLA, who has led the way in so many different issues in our community, and a voice to partner with on police reform. So we're going to be pulling on you to help us, guide us in this particular effort to have real comprehensive police reform that we can all, again, be proud of moving forward, because they have taken oath of office to serve and protect, and we want to make sure that they, in fact, do just that and not take our children, our sons and daughters' lives away under the color of authority. And so the governor has a number of different bills on his desk that I have put forth, and he has until September the 30th, 11:59 p.m. to sign those bills. And we're very encouraged that the governor will, in fact, sign those bills. I want to close on this note. We have Proposition 16 on the ballot, which is very, very important. The Legislative Black Caucus, the Latino Caucus, the LGBT Caucus, the Jewish Caucus, the Women's Caucus have all got behind this proposition, and now it's on the ballot. This will repeal Proposition 209. Remember back in the 90s, Proposition 209, everybody voted for it, thought it was going to help better and strengthen affirmative action, but the opposite effect has happened. When you look at how many Black and Browns are allowed to law school and to prestigious universities and things of that nature, women or people of color receiving governmental contracts, those things, this will level the playing field. And we certainly encourage people to please support Proposition 16 because it's the right thing to do. California was the first one to abolish affirmative action, and now we'll be the last one to restore affirmative action in this country. And California must lead the way in this regard. I want to just simply say this: census. We want to encourage everyone to make sure that you're counted in the census. California stands to lose $77 billion, and we need to make sure that California lose nothing. And so I want to say thank you so very much with your being so generous with your time, and I will be able to ask her any questions and respond any kind of way. Thank you so very much, and God bless you all.
Thank you, Assembly Member, for looking out for all of our communities, but especially our vulnerable ones. And I remember being at the good fight at 209. So hopefully everyone votes for Prop 16. So I'm a product of that as well. So amen. Again for your time. And now I want to toss it over to Bambi Salcido. She's president and CEO of the Trans-Latin Coalition. Bambi, bienvenida.
Buenas tardes, good evening, everyone. Primero que nada, gracias a Dios y a todas las personas que están aquí presentes. Bambi Salcedo, president and CEO of the Trans-Latin Coalition. I am really happy and an honor that I can share with you a couple of pieces of legislation that our organization has led. In fact, as an organization, we learned that for the first time in the history of this, the state of California, a trans-led organization has introduced, produced, designed, organized, pushed a piece of legislation all the way to the governor's desk. So we're really hoping that Assembly Bill 2218 gets signed by the governor, which is the Transgender Health and Equity Fund. And this piece of legislation will create a fund specifically to support trans and gender nonconforming people across the state of California. This effort was led by a coalition across the state of trans-led groups and organizations. And we're super, super excited that this piece of legislation is at the governor's desk. Also, Senate Bill 132, which is the Respect Agency and Dignity Act. We are we were part of the coalition of the core group who pushed for this piece of legislation, which is also in the governor's desk. And what Senate Bill 132 will do is that will give the autonomy or the agency to trans people who are incarcerated in the state of penitentiary to be able to choose where they will do their time and where they will feel most safest. This is not, this bill will not automatically have trans women transfer into women's jail or vice versa. This bill will give the autonomy or the agency and really dignity for trans people who are incarcerated to be safe and to do their time where they can be more safe. We also were part of a coalition to another bill which is also in the governor's desk, which is Senate Bill 555, which will give the opportunity of people who are incarcerated in county jails across the state to call their loved ones at a very low rate. So they're going to be paying 5 cents per minute. Obviously, people who are incarcerated should not pay for, for phone calls to their loved ones. But unfortunately, because of how the system is set up, and obviously because there was a lot of opposition from, police unions and all of those individuals, we were able to negotiate, and we're very happy also to report that that Senate Bill 555 is also on the governor's desk. So this year, although despite the difficulties and the challenges, not just with the pandemic, but also the challenges of how through the pandemic, trans people are going to be impacted and have been impacted, we're giving at least a little bit of hope to members of our community. And the most important thing, again, is that there's going to be a fund specifically allocated to support trans lives. And we are so grateful and happy that we get to participate through these processes. So I think that's about the time that I have. But I also wanted to obviously thank everyone who gave us letters of support, who help us organize and make sure that this bill gets all the way through. I do want to also say that Assembly Bill 2218 was led by Assembly Member Miguel Santiago, who we are their constituents. And so we're just really grateful, right, that a cis heterosexual man wanted to take this bill on and really stuck with us and fought with us all the way through. And we're so appreciative. And really, for people to understand, right, that when there's coalition or union and coalition building, then things could definitely happen. So please keep that in mind as you continue to do your work. So thank you again so much for the opportunity to be here with you.
Thank you, Sammy, for that update. No small feat what you're doing, and we appreciate everything you're doing for our vulnerable communities and for being that voice. And we wish you good luck on all of those bills. Dr. Elisha Smith Arrillaga from the Education Trust West. Can you give us an update, Doctor? Not sure she's on. If she isn't.
There you go. I'm going to be stepping in on behalf of Dr. Elisha Smith Arrillaga. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to try to be concise and just build a little bit more on what really amazing Assembly Member Gibson already spoke on, which was Prop 16. So again, hola, my name is Yvonne Munoz, and I'm a higher education policy analyst for the Education Trust West. So the Education Trust West, for folks who may not be acquainted with us, is a nonprofit organization that works to expose and eradicate inequities in California's education system. So thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here all with you today, especially during Latinx Heritage Month, in order to provide you all with a quick update on Prop 16, which, as Assemblymember Gibson said, will repeal California's ban on affirmative action. So as we know, Latinos or Latinx folks are the single largest and fastest growing ethnic group in California, but we're often left behind when it comes to employment and educational opportunities. And so the data is clear in how we're left behind. So for example, Latinos face gender-based pay discrimination and only make 42 cents for every dollar a white man makes. And in education, despite Latinx students making up more than half of 12th grade public school students last year, only a fourth of new UC freshmen were Latinx last fall. So as we can see, Prop 16 is a concrete step we can take to begin building a more just future where all of our Latinx family and friends can be provided the opportunity to succeed in a 21st century economy, job market, and the education system. And so ending California's ban on affirmative action will ensure our state and local leaders have tools to dismantle structural racism and to close racial inequities across all of the different sectors. We have just over a month until the election, so we need the energy and the voices of everyone on this call now more than ever. So I'm gonna go ahead and provide you all with a couple of resources that we hope will help you all get involved. You know, we can get involved at the individual or at the community level by either voting yes on Prop 16, becoming involved in educating voters in your networks, and then supporting to get the vote out. So to provide you some support in that, I'll go ahead and link here a toolkit that the Education Trust West provided and developed that'll help provide you some information and resources on how you can engage in educating voters in your network and to learn a little bit more about the proposition and how to directly engage with the Prop 16 campaign. And then I'll also include a Yes on Prop 16 Latinx toolkit, which is going to include some fact sheets in Spanish, some social media language, and talking points, so we can help gather support in the community. So let's do this. Thank you so much for having me, and I'll make sure and put all of our links in the chat box there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that important information and for updating us. We know we have lots of propositions. Yes, no, it's really important to be educated on what each of those votes mean and make sure that we get out to those polls. Now, we talk about civic education and getting out to vote, but part of that is also being counted, and our census is so important. And I know we're rounding third base, as we like to say, and we're coming to basically the last few days and being able to be counted. And for that, we have two incredible guests that have been added. The California Community Foundation, we know, is very relevant in that space, and we have Stephanie Ramirez, Director of Strategic Partnerships. Stephanie, please give us an update.
Hi, Christina and everyone.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, this is Stefania Ramirez, California Community Foundation. Happy to be here today. So a little bit about the census. So as we know, the census is critically important, and we are not performing. Our communities are not filling out the census. I'm just going to call it out. And it's going to have dire consequences if more of our Latinos and Latinas don't complete their census forms. Currently, we're at 64% in terms of response rates for all of LA County. What does that mean, or how does that stack up in terms of how we were, where we were in 2010? In 2010, just to share, we landed in the lowest, as the lowest responding county in the whole nation. In the whole United States, we were the lowest performing. And our response rate for the county was 69%. So currently being at 64%, we are still 5 percentage points way behind just even trying to meet the 2010 rate. So what is the foundation doing? The foundation has activated a We Count LA campaign. This has been an effort that's been undergoing for over now 2.5 years, where over 100 community-based organizations and hundreds of other cities and stakeholders around the county are supporting and amplifying the messaging that we're creating for them, videos, messaging, are making phone calls, are texting, are knocking on doors, are distributing flyers, our president COVID testing sites, COVID testing sites, and food distribution centers. All of these groups are out there continuing to raise the visibility for the importance of filling out the census form and getting encouraging and motivating people to actually fill it out. But we still have a long ways to go, and the deadline is up and coming with the census ending on September 30th. So, you know, I also have a request.
Am I the only one that can hear?
The host, I just got a message saying that the host.
If you could repeat your request again, Stefania, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah. So my request for everyone on this call and all of our attendees on this webinar is to please check out that link that I just provided on the chat box. It links you up to social media content that is ready for you to. All you need to do is click, download, use whatever social media platform that you have access to, and reshare. We have videos in English and in Spanish for you to use and for you guys to amplify. We partner with media and ethnic media agencies to make sure that across our county, that call to action to actually complete the form is live and present and is seen across. But again, I think the reality is we all need to put that social pressure on our families and friends. So that's a little bit of what's going on.
And really congratulations for the incredible work you continue to do. We know that these communities are vulnerable. They don't trust anyone, and then add COVID to that, our current administration, it just makes it that much harder. So thank you again, Estefania, for all the work that you're doing. And now we go to one of the models that is doing it correctly and are at least trying to reach those vulnerable populations, and that's their patients. And this is through the vision of Don Castro de la Rocha. I want to introduce Dr. Ilan Shapiro. He's a Medical Director of Health and Education and Wellness for Altamed Health Services. And I know that they're touching their 300,000+ patients to become involved. Ilan, Dr. Shapiro.
Thank you so much, Christina. It's always a pleasure to be here. And you know that I can talk for hours, and whenever you need me, just do the signals and I will be coding myself. As you know, a lot of the things are changing. The way that we're seeing life has changed. That we were bombarded with so much information that most of it, at the end of the day, we doubt. And we hear one channel or in social media or la comadre or compadre, they're sending us a lot of WhatsApp messages. And we just don't know where to go or what to do. But there's something that is consistent that we're having in our society, and that's actually our healthcare providers. As healthcare providers, we still believe in that area that we trust our doctors, we trust our nurses, and when they tell us something, usually, even though that it's good or bad, we believe on them. Our community, our society still sees this white coat as a symbol of purity, and we are actually using that. We're creating a model that creates different touch points between the patient coming to the clinic. At the moment that the patient is there, they will see the posters, they will hear the messaging, and have you done your census? Are you voting? Are you registering? And that way, from the beginning of the office visit at the front desk, and with the nurses and with the doctor, we all have the same message. Do you want to make something different? As a doctor, as a father, and as a pediatrician, I can tell you for sure that I have had these strong and hard conversations with the community. And one of them is actually something very personal that can change the lives of our community for 10 years. And that's the census. And the next following generation of our kids that is actually right now with the presidential selection that we're going to be having. And actually, one of the problems that we have had, and we have seen it with COVID, and it's not a miracle that our communities of color have been very devastated from this. It's decades of not being represented. It's decades of having poor access to healthcare, poor access to food, social stressors, bad schools, bad social determinants of health. And right now, giving in the tool to our communities and opening that door, like, do you know that you can actually register and do the census? Do you know that you can actually vote? Do you know how to do it? And having that material in a safe environment and with a trusted source, then they can have a discussion. And sometimes, I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm an expert in medicine and healthcare, and sometimes I need help. And having that structure about social justice and where to get them to do certain things regarding registration and the census, it's key to make a difference in our community. I'm proud to be part of this. I'm proud to see, the smiles of a lot of the family members that have been here for a long time in the US, and they have actually the access to vote, and they have never registered because they didn't know how to do it. And right now, opening that door and telling them about the census, that in 10 minutes, they can actually do a huge difference for 10 years of their kids and their grandkids probably in the future. And all of this is preparing us for the next pandemic, because there will be many more. It could be diabetes, it could be obesity, it could be a lot of other things that will attack our communities. The question is, are we going to be prepared or not? And the way that we can do it right now, no matter who you are or where you are, is actually to be represented in the census, and of course, be represented with your vote.
Dr. Shapiro, thank you for the incredible work that you're doing on behalf of Altamed. And you're absolutely right. What a better opportunity to say, Señora Pérez, asegúrese de comer bien, haga su ejercicio y no se olvide de salir. So imagine how it's just a perfect segue. Estefania, Dr. Shapiro, thank you so much for all the incredible work that we continue to do. And again, we're rounding third base into that deadline for census. And now we go to another topic that's been very much top of mind. And all of these are woven in very, very closely. And that is the topic of social justice. Again, we want to welcome those who have joined us in the past to talk about this very important topic. And in particular, what are some of those most pressing issues and how much have we advanced since March, the pandemic, and everything that's been going on across the country, the injustice and the intolerance that we're seeing across the country. And for that, Cristian Contreras from Justice X. Give us an update, Cristian. Bienvenido.
Gracias. Hi, everyone. My name is Christian Contreras. I am with Justice X. As everyone knows, and if you don't know, Justice X is a coalition of Black and Brown lawyers advancing Black and Brown interests and the interests of marginalized communities. My colleagues are Stephen King, who is here with me, as well as Humberto Guizar and Austin Dove. When we talk about social justice, unfortunately, a lot of the times it's very reactionary, because when we see an injustice, it is based off an event, certain conduct, and really what's going on. So it's relative. As we saw last night, Breonna Taylor, a very big issue. No charges, no direct charges against the 3 officers involved. The only charge that we saw was of one officer who inadvertently struck another building and people not even related to the killing of Breonna Taylor. So when we talk about social justice, we're talking about things that are done to certain populations, primarily Black and Brown, and social justice fighters, people like us, who are actually counteracting that and doing something in response to that. So when we last spoke, we were talking about how Justice X has a class action against LAPD for misclassification of thousands of people as gang members or gang associates. We also have an education initiative, and we also are involved in police reform. So since then, our class action is moving along. We are actually, advocating for people who had their due process rights violated. We're talking about people who have never been committed of a crime, have never been through a jury trial, have never been through the criminal process whatsoever, and are uploaded to a database. We see something analogous in sexual predators, right? These people are people who have been convicted of a crime, and then they are put into a database. Here, we're seeing people who aren't even committed of a crime and are uploaded to a database for perpetuity, forever. And this is a violation of due process. The Constitution guarantees everyone, irrespective of your origin, everyone in this country, due process. And misclassification of people as gang members is a violation of due process, a violation of something fundamental to this country. And we're doing that, we're counteracting that by actually suing the people who are involved in this and who actually violated the rights of people. So that's one thing that is moving along since we last spoke. And then another thing is also the education initiative, which is really getting to the root issues, the root causes of why people in our communities really don't understand what goes on, really don't understand the legal process. So the Justice X Education Initiative really is here to educate people about their rights, educate people about the legal process. So when it does come time to really, you know, go to court, whether it be for a traffic violation, whether it be for something more egregious or serious like a criminal offense, or maybe something even less serious like immigration proceeding or an immigration application, people know what to do. People have a basic understanding. And we do this and we aim this at younger people. So once they become older, they're well equipped to really understand the legal process, understand their rights, and really, you know, be well equipped to take on something that they were never equipped to do. And this applies to myself, you know, so as a young Latino, as a young Mexican person, I was never educated about my rights. I was never educated about anything. The first lawyer I met, you know, was when I was in college. So, you know, we want to mentor kids and we want to really establish social relationships with the community by doing this education initiative. And those are just some of the things that we've been working on. I'm not sure if Mr. Townsend or King want to touch on these topics or touch on other issues.
Thank you, Christian. Steve.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Christian. I believe I'm off mute. Essentially, I think the root of it all is accountability in the justice system, right? It's sad how the law disproportionately affects people that are Black and brown. And we've seen that time and time again. After we've started our initiative, I've never represented so many innocent people in my life. I mean, truly innocent. Something that Christian talked about was the fact that we have a class action suit against the LAPD because officers are pulling people over or encountering people on the streets, asking them questions, you know, what's your nickname? What hood are you from? What do they call you? And without these individuals even knowing, they get entered into a gang database. They have FI cards, field identification cards. And in fact, there have been cases where an officer claims they've been shot at. We have someone who's driving home from a basketball game after scoring 60 points. He's the star. He has a scholarship. And all of a sudden, he's being charged with a crime. And the effects are drastic. I mean, not only on that individual's self-esteem, livelihood, how they now get to identify themselves. Because when you're locked up, you there's cliques in there, right? So even though we've been successful at defending some of these people and getting them back on the streets, when they come back on the streets, it's almost now they have a gang moniker. They have stripes now all of a sudden. And this life that they thought they were pursuing now looks completely different. So as lawyers, we're fortunate enough to be the voice. It's not easy because there's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of opposition, and it's all about changing policies because, you know, the activism is great, the reform is great. We have all these issues now with the Trump administration and all the Republican judges that he's putting into the judicial system. Something a lot of people don't know is you have a great federal case, you file it in federal court, there's something called qualified immunity, and the judge can basically toss your case aside. About 50% of our cases get tossed aside and we appeal it. There's another 2 or 3 years that are involved before we're even able to come back to the table to have a seat and a voice for justice. So what we've been doing is really pushing along in the case against the LAPD. The officer involved there, his name is Braxton Shaw. He testified under oath. I mean, lies upon lies upon lies. We've now been able to tap into the public defender database and some of the other databases where they're going to share other cases where this individual has gotten on the stand and said, this person is a gang member. This person shot at me. In fact, he's cried under oath. And so whether these people are sociopaths or they just hate us or they don't relate to us or they don't understand us, what we're doing is trying to do the best that we can in the legal system to bring justice and to bring peace to the social justice system. So we're standing up. We have cases against the Sheriff's Department, the gangs that we all know about in the Sheriff's Department. We're pushing along on our LAPD case. We're trying to bring social justice and reform. And ultimately, we want our society to heal and have their voices heard.
Thank you.
No problem.
As a mother of a son, the conversations we have with them, it's yes about the birds and the bees and safe sex and everything else, but what to do when you're pulled over in the event that happens. And it's very unfortunate that needs to be a very, very serious conversation that we have with them about knowing their rights. So Skip, we haven't heard from you. If you could just
and this is the perfect segue to what I was going to say, because if I were to present to the panel that I'm in a abusive relationship and I'm afraid for my life every time I go home, and not just for me, for my children as well, I'm sure everyone on the panel would tell me I should leave that relationship. But when that relationship starts, when I leave my house with LAPD, with the LA County Sheriff, I'm in an abusive relationship that no matter where I run to or take my children, I'm still going to be in that type of relationship. So it's so important that, and I hate speaking behind litigators because they said everything I want to say, you know, but I think it's very important that we do this, that we bring light to the world. And I hate to say it, but it was actually, 55, 60 years ago that the people were acquitted for killing Emmett Till. The same day, 65 years later, that they didn't acquit, but they found no charges filed against the individuals who killed Breonna Taylor. So lastly, I want to say that say, for example, you know, Los Angeles is a beautiful place. The United States is truly a beautiful country. But if I'm riding in a helicopter, all I can see is the beauty. I can see the beauty of it. But there are people on ground zero that says, man, this is horrible. Just imagine being in a jungle. And it's scary at night. And people who don't have that lived experience would not understand what it feels like driving down the street and seeing a sheriff unit about to pull you over, or LAPD officer about to make a U-turn. It's a very scary feeling. And it's not that we get to heal. And I heard there was a question about healing. Well, we don't get to heal because what happens is it's not post-traumatic stress disorder. It's present. It's happening every day. And when it happens every day, there is no time for me to heal. I got to get ready for tomorrow. So appreciate being on here, and thank you for the words of both of them.
Thank you for joining us and giving us your time to update us on such important topics that are plaguing our communities, and just continue to do the work that you're doing. It's my honor to have moderated this evening's CharLA. Again, the leadership of ULF and Richard and Helen and everybody on the board. Now I'm going to take it to Richard, who we continue on to another event.
Cristina, I just want to say thank you so much for not only facilitating, but you make it look so easy and effortless and on time. And I just, hats off to you, because it is a skill. And as a board member and all the other board members, including Alejandra and Helen and other board members who are attending, thank you so much for making this happen. It's not possible without you, so I deeply appreciate it. That wraps up tonight's program.